Let's see. Oh, and we've got Cher Sandmeyer, it looks like. Hello, my friend Cher, and Charlie. We got Charlie as well. Yay. All right. So we're going to let people start filing in, and I'm going to get this running on Facebook, and then we can go. My poor little computer does not like all of these technical things I'm doing with it. It's like about 4 years old. And it's like I can hear the little monkeys in the processor like going, no, this is too sophisticated. So in the interim, while I'm getting this set up, if everybody other than Adam could please mute yourself, that would be fantastic. All right, everybody. It looks like we are now on and we are all ready to go. So welcome everybody back to another Friday Lunch and Learn. I am your hostess with the mostest as usual, Sarah Murdoch. And today on Lunch and Learn, we have a really cool guest, an exciting guest that maybe I haven't introduced you to before. This is my friend Adam Scott Goulding from London. Good morning, Adam. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Good evening. Doing very well here in London. Thanks for having me.
So Adam is joining us today, and I know him from London Walks, which is one of my absolutely favorite organizations for tour guiding. I have gone on, I think, probably 30 London Walks before. And how does London Walks work when people visit?
Yeah, very simple. We have a schedule. We schedule a number of walks every day, 10 or 12 walks, and we wait for you at the tube station, the appointed tube station, and you turn up and we go on a 2-hour walking tour. Nice and simple. Terrific program, but it's really just it's a mom and pop shop, to use that lovely North American phrase of which I am so very fond. Mary and David, and the company has been going since the 1960s. Yeah, nice and simple, turn up, pay on the day, and off we go.
Yeah, and I actually met Dave and Mary, I would say 10 years ago when I was working on updating the London book, and they're so knowledgeable, and the whole crew, all of you guys have come from different backgrounds and have different specialties. And I mean, really, if you go to London, you can just plant yourself in a hotel and have a fully guided tour by going on 2 London walks a day. That would be exhausting, but fun. So what is your specialty with London walks?
Well, I go all over town, but my beloved beat is music tours. Those are my favorite tours of all, music tours.
Yeah. So we have had you, I've had you as my local guide in London with my groups to do a ghost tour as well, which you do. And Adam has started doing something very exciting because, of course, none of us can do our jobs. You know, he can't do walking tours. I can't be guiding groups in Italy and museums right now. So instead, he's been one of the more innovative of my colleagues in coming up with something exciting, which is virtual tours. So how many do you do a day? Is it 1 a day or 2?
Well, now we've got a few colleagues on board with London Walks, and we've got 10 tours on the programme this week, and we'll have 14 next week. So
14 days.
yeah,
Wow.
14 by next week. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. So what, just tell us a little bit about what a virtual tour is and how that works. So if people who cannot travel would like a taste of travel, how can we replace our travel with a virtual walk?
Yes, well, what we're doing at the moment is we're desk bound. We can't get outside, so we're presenting our tours online, like this, to the camera, and we're sharing photographs that we've taken down through the years. I've been blogging about London for 18 years now, so photographs, blog posts, footage that we've accrued down through the years, original documents, all sorts of stuff. That's what we're up to at the moment. As the lockdown slowly begins to ease, we're going to be doing a little bit of live to camera out in the street stuff. So it's evolving, but at the moment we're desk bound, and we're coming round your house, whether you like it or not, to lead guided tours.
So this is, I think, a really fun, new, innovative sort of thing. And Adam actually has been helping me out by tutoring me and other tour guides on ways that we can maybe present information and do guided tours online, and also, make a little money. So the tours you do are £8 a person. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
And a maximum of how many people on the Zoom call?
15. Just so we can have a nice intimate group and we can have a chat and try and make a connection, because that's the hard thing, isn't it? To make a connection, into this box here. So small groups so we can sort of get to know each other.
That is such a great idea. So I'm really hoping that my colleagues and I can also join you and your colleagues at London Walks in trying to pursue this new thing. And also, I think this is an exciting thing for people who actually can't travel. There's a lot of people out there that just don't have the ability to travel anymore. And so they can join a walk as if they were in London with you. So it's an exciting new thing. And as you and I were talking about yesterday, this may not be a temporary thing. This may be a part of our gig in the future, is, bringing our teaching to anybody who wants, even from their own comfy chair in their basement. So yeah, I think it's a super exciting plan. So thank you for all of your innovation on this, on behalf of all tour guides. So Adam is an expert in music. This is one of his great passions, as you can tell by his fantastic shirt. So what I have asked Adam to come and talk to us about today is he's going to share just sort of a sample, a little taster of what his virtual tours are like. And he's going to talk with us today about the music scene in London and the Beatles and some other things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and hand over hosting to him, and he's going to start driving. And if you guys have questions, you can always raise your hands, and you can also just hang on to the end. We'll have probably about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to be able to chat if you guys would like to talk with Adam. So hang on one second and let me get him the ability to drive. This poor computer is just not enjoying all the work I'm giving it. All right, here we go. All right,
so I'm driving.
You're on, go for it.
Driving on the wrong side of the road here. Let's have a look at a couple of slides that I've put together just this afternoon to give you, as Sarah said, a little flavour of what I do here with my virtual tours in London. London Music Tours, my name's Adam, lovely to see you. Socially distanced guided tours, hashtag tour guiding from home, that's what we're up to. And we chatted last week, Sarah, we'll do a sort of general music thing with a bit of the Beatles, as you said there. But then this afternoon at lunchtime, it struck me. I don't know why I didn't think of this. You're based in Washington State there, and there's a terrific connection between Washington State and London in terms of music. So I've changed direction a little bit, and we're going to go looking, instead of the Beatles, we're going to go looking for Jimi Hendrix here in London. So in a moment or two, this screen should load here. Here we go. Now, can everyone see the screen there?
It's still loading.
Still loading. Okay, I'll get the spoons out and do a song while it's loading there. What we're going to be looking at in a moment is a picture of a blue plaque. Here in London, our markers, our plaques, commemorate the great and the good who have lived here. Great cities become great cities largely thanks to what's been achieved in those places. And this blue plaque, coming up in an hour or two, is dedicated to Jimi Hendrix, who lived in London for a period in the 1960s. His flat, quite a terrific location in Mayfair. Mayfair is the dark blue square on the London Monopoly board. Quite a good one to get. Quite a fancy part of town. And he lived in a flat on top of a house that had once been owned by George Friedrich Handel, the great German composer. I'm just going to make an attempt to reload
There
that.
we go.
Then.
Now we see it. Well, yeah.
Okay, we might do it low tech here. So there we go. How about that? Can we?
Yeah, just go ahead and do them from there. Yeah, that works.
Fantastic. Okay, well, there's the house in question. Can we all see that?
Yeah.
Here are the blue plaques here. One for George Friedrich Handel, one for Jimi Hendrix. Handel, the greatest Englishman ever born in Germany, lived here in the 18th century. The house was new when he moved in. We still have part of the original Georgian staircase here. This is looking down the staircase, vertiginous stairway there. We have his musical instruments. This is a double manual harpsichord. And upstairs from this wonderful museum, the Handel House, we have the Hendrix flat, something more formal. The brand of cigarettes he smoked at the time, he smoked Benson and Hedges cigarettes. Matthias Rosé was the drink of the day in the 1960s. It's been painstakingly recreated, the Hendrix flat, by a woman called Kathy Etchingham. She's the curator. She lived with Jimi Hendrix here, so she remembers all the details, right down to his record collection. Terrific record collection here, including, if you can see there, a copy of The Messiah by George Friedrich Handel. There it is, that's much better. It's almost like he was trying to channel Handel down through the centuries. I rather like that. The flat was above an office, and it was perfect for Hendrix because the office closed at 5 o'clock, which is roughly the time that musicians get out of bed. That's the morning for musicians. And so the whole night through, he could make music, he could party. It was absolutely perfect. And then sleep all day and not disturb anyone. So Kathy Etchingham has recreated his record collection for us here, which is terrifically done. You can sit on Hendrix's bed as well and wear a version of his hat. The bedspread and the wall hanging I'd like to look at here. Kathy Etchingham and Jimi Hendrix shopped together to furnish this little rented flat. And the bedspread here and the wall hanging, they purchased those at John Lewis on Oxford Street. Now, John Lewis is a department store in our country. It's a lovely department store. It's very middle England. It's very tame and acceptable to the middle class. And it seems like an unusual place for Jimi Hendrix to be shopping. But that's where they bought the bedspread and the wall hanging. Now, Kathy Etchingham approached the John Lewis Company when they opened this building as a museum. And she said, I bought a bedspread here, roughly this date, roughly this colour, roughly this shape. And they went into the archives and had these reproduced faithfully so that they could have the proper period detail in the museum. There in the distance is another bottle of Matthias Rosé. You can dress up there too. This is about 6 years ago. This is myself and my daughter Isabella. Isabella is dressed as Jimi Hendrix. I'm dressed as George Friedrich Handel. So it's a terrific family-friendly museum, the Handel and Hendrix House. We can't get to the museums at the moment, but next time you come and see us in London, do go and visit Handel and Hendrix. If the staff there were half as friendly, they'd still be the loveliest in London. Expert curators, very approachable. Understandably, the Handel end of things, some of the stuff in there is absolutely priceless. So there's a certain formality to the Handel Museum. But upstairs in the Jimi Hendrix flat, it's a bit more easygoing. Lovely contrast. This is the theatre where Jimi Hendrix became famous in this country. He's an unusual phenomenon in so much as he belongs to the United States. but becomes famous here, first of all. He played in this building. This was the Saville Theatre. Today it's the Odeon Cinema. He played in here on the 4th of June 1967 with the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And he opened the show that night with the title track to Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So we got the Beatles in. Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band had been released on the 1st of June 1967. So 3 days later, Jimi Hendrix is playing it live in this building here. As he did so, sitting in the Royal Box, watching and listening, sitting in the Royal Box, watching as Jimi Hendrix played Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, in the Royal Box, not the Queen, better than the Queen, Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney is looking on as Jimi Hendrix played his song. Hendrix went on to smash the guitar, do the whole routine. The legend of Jimi Hendrix is born in this building on the 4th of June 1967. When he came through the door to play, he was a musician. When he came out, he was Jimi Hendrix, the star. It's no longer a theatre, it's a cinema. We'll have a quick look at the building as well, because this is on a very busy road in London. It's a transitional building. It's on a very busy road called Shaftesbury Avenue. And usually we can't stop here because it's too noisy. But on a virtual tour, we can get up close with the building. Can you see the frieze through the middle? The frieze is the history of show business. Beautifully done. Designed in 1928. Here's Bottom from William Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. There's a terrific line when he's been turned into an ass. He says, "Oh, I must to the barber. I feel my face is wondrous hairy." And we look at the carving here, and wondrous hairy it certainly is. Lovely detail. So we've got Shakespeare there. We've got the Dancing Girls from 1928. This was designed in 1928. This is Sherlock Holmes. Conan Doyle was still alive when this carving was made on the old Saville Theatre. And here's my favourite. Right in the middle of the picture, here's Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry. There's a lot going on in this carving. I'm particularly fond here of Bacchus's beer belly hanging over his midriff there. The god of wine and revelry. Now he's right in the middle of the picture here, and he should actually be at the other end in ancient Greece, but he's drunk. This is what Bacchus would do. Burst into the picture drunk, behaving in an unruly fashion. In fact, he's so unruly that even Arlecchino from the Italian Commedia dell'arte is trying to straighten him out. Can you see Arlecchino there? Trying to push Bacchus back to ancient Greece. Lovely detail, I think, on the old Saville Theatre, which was designed in 1928. It's a cinema today. Jimi Hendrix became a legend here on the 4th of June 1967. So, yeah, there's the window. Well, these days it's aluminium paneling. Back in 1928, it looked like this. This window was blown out on the 9th of October 1940 during the Blitz. Now, the 9th of October 1940 is an important day in our music story because the 9th of October 1940 was the night that John Lennon was born in Liverpool, the northwestern seaport where all the ships came in from the US and Canada. Now, Liverpool was bombed most nights, but not on the 9th of October 1940. They had a rare night off Liverpool because the Luftwaffe were busy here, blowing the window out of this theatre, the Saville Theatre. I think it's quite appropriate. I don't know what you think, but John Lennon became known as such a man of peace. I think it's appropriate that he was born on a night in Liverpool when no one was killed. This is the Saville Theatre, a little taster of the sort of thing we do on our virtual tours while we can't get outside, because I'm hashtag tour guiding from home. There are my credentials there. My tour guiding badge is on my carpet slippers these days because we're stuck inside. So a little flavour of what we do on our music tours here in London.
That is fantastic, Adam. So what is your favorite thing to do when you are out on the streets? If I were to join you on a regular tour, you do a lot of music tours. And so what is kind of your passion to talk about when it comes to music?
I think in terms of music, the Beatles. I love to talk about the Beatles. Yes. In fact, I love to talk about all music. I found I think all of us have been rummaging through our stuff, haven't we, in lockdown, tidying things up and throwing things away. I found a lovely book called Where Did Our Love Go? Um, Perhaps appropriately, it was given to me by an ex-girlfriend a long time ago. It's the story of Motown Records in Detroit. It's a terrific book. And I'd forgotten the inscription in the flyleaf. She'd written, "Just read it. Don't bore us all to death talking about it," which made me chuckle, because these days I talk about music for a living. But the Beatles are my very favorite.
Okay. And well, did I ever tell you that I'm actually related to one of the Beatles?
You did not.
I did
Tell
not.
me now.
Really? All these years and I've never told you this story. Well, just a little personal story for you guys. My grandmother is from Liverpool, and well, she was, and her sister was really into keeping the family together. And so in the 1960s, my dad, who was an immigrant from Northern Ireland, received in the mail a record from his cousin's band. And it was signed by all of them. This is great family lore, that this record was signed by all of the Beatles, and it was from Cousin Paul. So my dad, of course, listened to it once and was like, yeah, and kind of tossed it. Like, yeah, it's my cousin's band, whatever. But I guess my dad says that they corresponded a little bit when he was a teenager. So yeah, so there you go. My dad is a cousin of Paul McCartney.
Fantastic. That's a terrific story. Thank you.
So what I was just thinking, maybe if we could just chat a little bit about sort of what people can, if they're interested in music, what are the different threads that people can chase in London if they're interested in exploring the music scene of the past?
Yes, what are the different threads here in London? Well, Handel, George Friedrich Handel, whose music has been the soundtrack to every coronation at Westminster Abbey since that of George II, Zadok the priest. He lived in Mayfair. His musical fingerprints are all over town, so he's a particularly good one to chase. The Beatles are a London thing. They were born in Liverpool, but they had to come to London. Born in Liverpool, made in Hamburg, but all the business of music was here, so they had to come here. All roads lead to London in terms of the entertainment business in those days. So London's a great Beatle town. It's a terrific Bob Dylan town as well. Bob Dylan was here in '62, very early in his career. He was here to act in a play for the BBC. I don't know if you've ever seen Bob Dylan act. Well, he's a great harmonica player. Let's just leave it there. He starred in a play for the BBC, so he was a young man here. My particular favourite, I think, if you're a devotee of Paul Simon, Paul Simon came here in '65 and as a young man. And I think you're probably familiar with Paul Simon in Interview. He's quite spiky. He's a little defensive. He wants to talk about the art. He doesn't want to talk about his life, quite reasonably so. But when you get him onto the topic of London as a young man, he opens up, because he was a young man here. He fell in love here, which is a lovely thing to do anywhere. But he holds a special place in his heart for London. A woman called Kathy. You may remember the line in the song America. Kathy, I'm lost, I said, though I knew she was sleeping. Kathy was his girlfriend here in London in '65. And it was for Kathy that he wrote Homeward Bound. He wanted to be back home with Kathy, not home in New York. He was in Wigan in the northwest, Widnes in the northwest of England. Little place, not much there, nice little place. He was on tour and he missed Kathy and London. So he wrote Homeward Bound on the railway station in Widnes, and there's a plaque there too marking the spot. So in terms of it being a commercial place with music business, with theatre, everyone's come through London at some point.
I had no idea about the Paul Simon angle on that. That's so interesting. We have a
So
question here.
with that. It's that much Paul Simon, but we're keeping it. You know, we're very fond of it.
Well, I've always associated those particular songs with like road trips through the United States. I would have never associated those songs with London or with England.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's the lovely line in America when he says, "Kathy, I'm lost, I said, though I knew she was sleeping." And at that moment in the song, you're never sure if she's beside him on the Greyhound bus with her head on his shoulder, or if she's in England and he's singing wistfully across the thousands of miles. It's a lovely, lovely moment.
Gosh, I never thought of it that way, but you're right, huh? We have a question actually from one of the participants here. They'd like to know, for the current music scene, what open mic venues do you recommend for catching up with whoever is current? You know, what are the hot spots right now for listening to music? Obviously they're close, but you know, in the past few years, where have been the places that people go to listen to new music?
Great, that's a great question. Thank you, because it's kind of a real estate question as well. As I'm sure you know, real estate in London is expensive, and so the centre of town has become a kind of high-end place, and little music venues have been squeezed out of the West End, the traditional entertainment district since the days of Charles II in the 1660s. And so squeezing the West End like that has forced the venues out a little further, particularly to the north. Camden Town remains a good place to hear live music. Camden Town, they have a number of bars there when they're open that do, you know, live music. Still a few little clubs left. The Troubadour in West London in Earl's Court, we're hoping that's going to reopen as well when this lousy war is over. They do terrific live music there, acoustic music. So it still goes on. There was a bit of legislation brought in the 90s under Blair's government, a noise abatement legislation, which makes it very difficult for pubs and bars to get a license to have any more than 2 or 3 musicians. So that hit the West End really hard as well. But you can still hear live music in pubs. Bob Dylan hated that. When he came here in the 60s, he hated the idea that you would just stand up in the pub and play. Because even the diviest little place in Greenwich Village had some kind of semblance of a stage and lighting. But not in the English pubs. You just stand up and live and die by your own talent. It's a tough arena. So it still goes on. Yeah, come and see us and hit Camden Town. Come out of Camden Town tube station and just walk along like this. Sooner or later, you'll come across some live music.
Actually, I think if I came out of Camden Town tube station and did this, I'm not sure where I'd go because it's so cacophonous there. There's so much going on. If you've never been to Camden Town, that's absolutely one of my favorite parts of London because it reminds me a lot of how like Capitol Hill in Seattle used to be, or kind of the hip places, Berkeley, like any of the cool places that in any city in the world. It feels like it's that on steroids. You know, I know that you enjoy that part. We went there last time with our kids in the summer. So as far as chasing the Beatles, I know that's one of the things that's a really popular tour that people do, the Beatles sites. Do you have any suggestions on ways to see Beatles sites that are maybe lesser known?
Ooh, yes. I think it's always interesting to look at the Beatles in the 1960s context. And so you can really get into the recent history of London, the recent socio-political history of London through the story of the Beatles. I think that's a good way of going off the beaten track, to look at perhaps political scandals that formed part of the backdrop to the 1960s, to look at the abolition of compulsory military service in this country in '56, which has a big impact on that Beatles and Stones generation. I think that's a good way of going off the beaten track. Having said that, there is that desire to go off the beaten track, but I think it's inadvisable to go too far off the beaten track, because if we don't go to Abbey Road, then people get disappointed. Because I used to think at first, I thought, well, it's just a zebra crossing, you know, and it's just a house. The famous studio was built as a house, but it's the picture. And there's actually a lot of fun can be had with visitors. You know, we do the tour, we end up at Abbey Road, and, you know, we spend a lot of time taking the famous picture, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, you can go off the beaten track, but there are certain things you have to see, and you have to see Abbey Road.
I remember seeing in the news, I think it was maybe a month ago, that it was the first time in years they've actually been able to paint that zebra crossing because there's nobody on it.
Quite so, quite so. That was a lovely story.
So what other musicians can you track down? So Jimi Hendrix is one, the Beatles is another, and Paul Simon. Are there any other musicians that you can track down when you're in London if you're a fan?
Sure. Yeah, we've got just kicking it forward a little bit to the 1970s, the punk scene, the Clash in West London, the Sex Pistols in the centre of town in Denmark Street, which is traditionally the home of the business, the music business, our version of Tin Pan Alley. The Sex Pistols used to squat there, living illegally without paying any rent. Very Sex Pistols. We can visit the places where they used to go shopping, shopping, free shopping, stealing. Yeah, they're terrific dyed-in-the-wool London bands, the Sex Pistols and the Clash. I think when we tell the Sex Pistols story these days, there's a sort of a Keystone Cops aspect to it. It seems kind of music hall. It seems almost kind of tame and innocent. The Clash, however, retain that kind of rebel, that whiff of cordite about them.
Well, tell us that
Rebellious.
story then. Tell us a little bit about that story, the Keystone Cops version.
Yeah, well, the Pistols and their shopping habits. Steve Jones, the guitar player from the Sex Pistols, he was in charge of the shopping when they lived on Denmark Street, and he came out of the squat on Denmark Street on one famous occasion and walked down the road to Mccartney's music shop, which is still there, great guitar shop. And he walked in and he took two guitars off the wall and walked out. He walked out. Now, I think the key there is walk, don't run. If you run, you will get caught. I hadn't expected to be giving you shoplifting tips on this little presentation, but here we go. He walked back to the squat and gave the guitars to a chap called Glenn Matlock, who was at that point the Sex Pistols bass player before Sid Vicious. And he said, here, I've got these guitars, go and sell them and we'll have money. So Glenn Matlock took the guitars out of the squat, down the Charing Cross Road. You've seen this coming from a mile away, haven't you? He walked back to the store from whence they'd been stolen 10 minutes earlier, bringing them back to sell them. A policeman is duly called and asks to be appraised of the situation. He appointed himself the policeman, judge, jury, and executioner, and he issued the punishment. He kicked Glenn Matlock in the seat of the pants, and that was it. So it's like an olden days Bash Street Kids sort of London Bobby story. There was no court case, there was no criminal record. A kick in the pants and off he went. So when the Clash are doing kind of political gigs like founding the Rock Against Racism movement in this country, the Sex Pistols are doing, cat candy shoplifting.
All right, so give us the compatible story. So for the other side, so not the Sex Pistols, but tell us the other side. What is the more rough end of that time period?
Yeah, of the 70s. Well, it's a massive period of protest. We're in recession. There's nothing new under the sun. And the disaffected youth of the suburbs, having been sort of reared on tales of victory in the Second World War, are kind of looking around themselves and thinking, well, it doesn't feel particularly victorious, and they're taking our symbols of nationhood, our Union Jacks and our target badges from the Royal Air Force, and subverting them and turning them into popular culture costumes. It's a period of great rebelliousness, and the sound of punk rock as a clarion call, a 3-chord clarion call, ringing out to places like Bromley in the southeast of London. The hardcore punk rock fans were called the Bromley Contingent. Bromley's a lovely suburban place. It seems like an unusual location for the fans of punk rock to find their headquarters. But yeah, the kids of the suburbs really heeded that call. It was not a great commercial success, punk rock. Everybody, here, as in the US, we were buying disco. That's what we were doing. We were buying disco, we were dancing, we were listening to ABBA and the Bee Gees. So it's a kind of minority commercial entity, but in terms of artistic influence, I think we still feel its its shockwaves today. The Pistols and the Clash.
That's a very interesting story, because I've lived a very analogous sort of story in that I grew up in, well, I didn't grow up here, but I moved to Washington State when I was 15, and we lived in the suburbs, about 20 miles south of Seattle. And that's right when the grunge stuff started. And I remember in high school people saying, hey, there's this band Nirvana that's pretty cool. You want to go see them? Before anybody knew who they were. And so, yeah, so that was my scene. I grew up in the grunge scene, and I went to all the punk shows and all the grunge shows in that time. You probably didn't know that about me, Adam, that I'm a former grunge and punk enthusiast, actually. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I do have my street cred. But that sounds like the same thing. You know, people think, oh, grunge came from Seattle, but it most definitely didn't. It came from the depressed, smaller towns in Washington State, from outside of the center of Seattle. And then it just moved into Seattle, because Seattle actually was a really not a very economically prosperous place in the 90s when I lived here. So it was a cheap place to get a warehouse to perform and to, you know, practice. So I'm sure that that's the same story in London, it sounds like, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Huh, okay. So moving forward a little bit into the 1980s, what are the bands that you like to have people, to tell people about from the 80s in London? I can think of a
Well,
few.
we're getting into, oh, I'm sorry.
I can think of a few that I was into when I was a kid, like Duran Duran and some of those others. Is there an interest in people wanting to go and look for the roots of 80s music?
Little bit. I think in terms of our context here in London, the London band, the London Rolling Stones to Duran Duran's Beatles would have been Spandau Ballet, who were who kept pace with Duran Duran almost every step of the way in the 80s. The New Romantics. In many ways, Spandau were much cooler. They were very much involved in the New Romantic scene here in London. Very elitist scene in terms of look and fashion. It harkens back to the 60s again. They're like the 80s version of the Mods, M-O-D, Mod. The Mods lived for clothes and music, and mainly working class kids, and that repeats in the 1980s with the New Romantics, only with a much more outlandish look. So huge haircuts, flock of seagulls perhaps, huge baggy trousers, and wonderful exotic peacock look, and Spandau Ballet were central to that. I hope this doesn't, it makes me feel a little bit old, I have to say, but we now have a commemorative plaque on the club where Spandau Ballet played in the 1980s. I think
What are the blue ones?
yeah, commercial. Can you imagine a plaque already for the 1980s?
Wow. Yeah.
I think to get commercially successful, Spandau became much more formal in their look, with ties and short hair. And I remember really hating them. I remember I never really forgave them, because when they came on Top of the Pops, which was the big pop show in this country in the 80s, my mother and my father would say, look, he's got short hair and he's wearing a tie and he's on the hit parade. And I used to hate Spandau Ballet for that. I should really, I should blame my parents, of course, but I never really forgave Spandau Ballet for going into the ties and the short haircuts. But yeah, they were the big guys in the 80s. And it's out of that same scene that Boy George and Culture Club grows. The New Romantic scene here in London. Great club scene, druggy scene as well. Drugs, fashion and music. There's nothing new under the sun.
You know, I remember seeing Spandau Ballet on MTV, and I always thought that their whole look was a little bit like throwback ironic. I thought that was kind of the point of that. Not that they wanted to appeal to the masses, but the scene that I personally was interested in back in those days was, that the scene you're talking about, Flock of Seagulls, Morrissey, The Cure, because a lot of those are the roots to the alternative music scene that developed really heavily here in Seattle, especially. So is that sort of a thing that people come exploring these days, looking for the roots of the alternative music scene?
Yes, I think those founding fathers, the Clash and the Pistols and all those guys are, people are looking for that, because everyone of every age, we just have access to everything now, to music. Music used to be quite hard to come by. You know, I remember I traveled. I read when I was 15 about Sonny Boy Williamson, and I thought he sounds pretty good. And I went round 3 record shops in Edinburgh, nothing. And they said, you'll have to go to Dundee, which is 40 miles away. 40 miles is a long way in this country. So I made an 80-mile round trip to buy a record. And I brought it home. Luckily, I enjoyed it. What if I hadn't liked it, you know? Yeah, kids have got music at their fingertips these days, so they're really well versed in the heritage aspect of things, the Clash, the Pistols, all those guys, and they come, as you say, looking for the roots of the alternative scene. I think here in London, the reaction to grunge, there was a whole sort of coterie of bands here that reeled away from grunge. Um, and looked for something more quintessentially English.
Like Oasis, for example.
Oasis, Blur, all those guys. And
Yeah.
they tried the grunge thing, Blur did, and
Yeah.
it didn't fit. It didn't, you know, it didn't fit them. So they looked for something more English. So grunge is influential in quite some surprising ways as well.
So one of the things that I did when I was in high school and college was make a lot of mixtapes, and actually that was the dating sort of resume. That's how you submitted your resume if you wanted to date me. Is you had to submit a mixtape, and then I would evaluate your worthiness based on your mixtape. And so, did you do that? Did you make mixtapes? And what are your feelings about the loss of the mixtape?
Yeah, firstly, yes, I did that. Secondly, I think you should maintain that system of value judgment throughout your whole life. I don't think it will ever let you down.
I've just recently re-entered the dating pool, so I was thinking about reinstituting that policy, but I'm not sure what the kids do these days.
Can be done. Spotify playlists are the new mixtapes. Yeah, they can submit their CV by email with a Spotify playlist. I approve.
So what were your special mixtape techniques? Because mine were that it had to have a story and a flow. I would create a kind of a story that moved up to a crescendo, and then maybe have a different mood on the back side, on the B side, and then you always had to kind of have the transitions and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you did that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's that's a terrific sort of angle of curation. I approve of that as well. But being a bit of a nerdy boy as well, obscurity was quite important to me. So I'd try and find obscure tracks, which I thought would make me attractive to women. But actually, it turned out it just made me attractive to other boys who also liked obscure music. I think that story could be told again and again and again.
Well, I have to tell you, if somebody gave me a mixtape of Oasis, I would have deleted their phone number. And yeah, one guy once gave me a mixtape that was 3 hours of Fish, and I was like, no, no. What is the best mixtape you ever made?
Oh, the best mixtape I ever made is, yeah, it was called Marchmont 89. It was called a little district of Edinburgh called Marchmont, where I lived as a student when I was 20. And it just reminds me of that time, and it's a thrill to when the tracks, because I no longer have the tape. I you know, presented it to the object of my affections, but I remember the tracks, and when I hear those tracks, it's that sort of Proustian rush of woof, you're right back there. Steeler's Wheel were on there with Stuck in the Middle. Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, lots of Bob Dylan. Um, yeah, Nick Drake was our particular passion
Oh, I love
at
Nick Drake.
college. Yeah, he sold several hundred records in his lifetime. No, you know, nobody knew of him. And yeah, he was big at our college in the 80s. Yeah,
I
I want to
remember
go and listen
picking up
to
on
him
Nick
now.
Drake at some point, and I thought he was contemporary. Like, this is in the 90s at some point. I remember picking up one of his albums and being like, oh, he's really good. And then I didn't realize that was something, that he was dead, and that was it, you know.
Yeah, and he lived just down the road from here in a flat in Belsize Park. and he took over the lease of that flat in Belsize Park, which is in Hampstead. He took over the lease from a fellow called Martin Carthy, and Carthy taught Paul Simon Scarborough Fair, and Carthy also had Bob Dylan to stay on New Year's Eve 1962 into 63, all in that little flat, and Nick Drake ended up living there.
Wow. Huh. So what are you listening to right now?
Ooh, what am I listening to right now? I'm on a huge Bob Dylan binge at the moment. So listening to Dylan. I was listening to Liszt this morning, Franz Liszt. I've been reminded about his story and the idea that he was like the first kind of rock star, and he had difficulty untangling his celebrity from his ability, and sometimes wasn't taken very seriously, and was a bit of a man for the ladies. I just love the 19th century context with the 20th and 21st century rock star undercurrent. So I was listening to him this morning, but yeah, I'm on a Bob Dylan bender at the moment.
Oh, that's nice and
It was
retro.
his birthday. It was his birthday last weekend. He was 975 years old.
And still going strong. I think he and Keith Richards are both like undead. I think they're zombies because I don't understand how they've lived that long. So I have a question in here. What about me? What am I listening to? I haven't been listening to a lot of music. I used to, when I was an architect, I listened to music all day long, every day as I drafted. And so I have a huge music collection. I've always been a huge music fan. But in the last few years, I haven't been listening to much. The funny thing is when my kids were born, Isabella's about the same age as my son, Nico. And when the kids were born, I thought to myself, I'm going to have the coolest hipster music kids on earth. I played them Built to Spill, which is one of my favorites. I played them The Cure. I played them all kinds of like punk. And I took them to, all the big music festivals like Bumbershoot. They've seen Death Cab for Cutie live. They've seen Beck live when they were babies. They've seen all these big acts when they were babies. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have the coolest kids on earth. They're all going to be musicians. And guess what? My kids think my music is garbage. They think my music is loud and irritating. And they don't like, they like Beck. They'll listen to Beck. And actually the Beck album Colors that came out last year if I can recommend one album to every one of you guys right now, that's what I would recommend, because that album is so cheerful and it's what we need in this moment. The other thing I'm listening to that my kids are teasing me mercilessly for is I really like Billie Eilish. And I've been listening to a lot of Billie Eilish, and my kids are like, Mom, that's like what depressed teenagers listen to. But I keep trying to tell them, you guys don't understand who I was, and my music pedigree is that I came up in the grunge scene. So my kids, their reaction is this: your music is garbage. Pop and grunge and punk, that's all garbage. What we like is classical and jazz. So, and Luca likes to listen to Russian military marches. Vivaldi's his big thing right now as well. So yeah, they only listen to classical or jazz because, my parents' generation listened to rock as a reaction to their parents being too square. So you knew that it would have to go the opposite direction. What is Isabella listening to?
She listens to a bit of everything. She's 13 in a couple of weeks' time. 13 next weekend. But she's terrific. She's open to anything, but she loves Billie Eilish. It's been a real education for me. We have Black History Month in October in this country. I think you guys have it in February, March.
Yeah.
She had homework to do when she was 5. She was sent home with homework for Black History Month. Find out 5 things about a black entertainer. And she came home and said, "Can I look at your records? Because you've got black people on your records," is what she said. And I thought, well, if you don't have very good records. I said, sure, have a look. And she went through everything. And what she pulled out was the Supremes' greatest hits, the one from '67. And I was intrigued. I said, why did you pick that one? And she said, well, there's 3 of them. And I only have to find out 5 things, so that'll be easy. And I thought that was quite clever. But the main thing she said, I picked them because they were girls.
Yeah.
and she just reacted. She react as a tiny tadpole. She reacted immediately to women singers, and I just thought that was I hadn't seen that coming.
Yeah, and
That was
I've
such a
been
good
very
approach.
curious about this Billie Eilish phenomenon because, girls really react strongly to her. And I picked up on listening to her. I think I was in a hotel room somewhere in Slovenia and I turned on my TV and like that's what was playing. I'm like, oh shit, that's pretty good. And what I think I'm appreciating and understanding about her is that she's kind of a gender bender. And I think she has an interesting message for women, which is, she's against body shaming. That's why she wears all the baggy clothes, because she doesn't want that to be even a part of the conversation. And that's just such a great and progressive message, I think, to give to young girls. So I don't know. I've been really thinking a lot about her and her music and the effect why is she so popular with the girls today? And I don't envy your position of raising a girl today. Boys are pretty easygoing and I don't see a problem, but man, it's tough for girls to navigate the world these days, I think. But
Yeah.
Isabella's pretty well adjusted, right?
No, she's good. She's got the measure of me. We went camping last August. I think just after we met up in London here, Sarah, and we went camping and we took the guitars. She's learning to play the guitar, and we sat in a field and sort of played music. But she really asserted herself, saying, "No, I want to teach you this one, and I want to teach you this one." So she was, keen to get me involved in what she's listening to, and it was thrilling. It's really great.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we're just about out of time. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and just pop them into the chat box. But before we go, I just wanted to have you give a little plug for what you're doing next, because you're such an entertaining guide, I have to say. And by the way, the promos that you're putting on Twitter, your little trailers, are spectacular. I love the way you're kind of going about this in such a theatrical kind of way. And that's definitely your guiding style. You're definitely like a theatrical guide that just is gripping in terms of keeping people's attention. So what talks do you have coming up for the next week or two?
Well, we're experimenting. Thank you, Sarah. We're experimenting. I'm doing Beatlemania tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. our time here in London. It's an experiment. We're hoping to attract people at, what would it be, 4:30 New York, 3:30 Chicago, 1:30 you guys over
Yeah.
on the West Coast. So we are 9:30 tomorrow night. The virtual tour Beatlemania, that's the next one. It's £8, and the deal is keep your ticket, and when you can come and see us, just march up to me at the tube station and say, I've got one of these tickets, and you can have the tour for free when you can get here. Whenever that may be, it's open-ended. So it's Beatlemania tomorrow. What else are we doing? Next Friday night is the Rock and Roll London tour with live music. So I'll be doing a little bit of live music on that tour as well. Saturday also is Ghosts of the Old City. For those who believe in that sort of thing, that's the sort of thing they believe in.
Well, and I highly recommend it because that's the walk that I often do with Adam with my groups because he's so good at it. So that's the one I would probably say if you want to start with one virtual tour, it's good fun. What else you got cooking? Anything else?
Well, we're trying to expand the program of the virtual tours. The lockdown is being eased slightly, but in a very confusing way. So we don't quite know where we stand yet. So yeah, more virtual tours. I'm going to do a Jimi Hendrix tour. I'm doing a Bob Dylan tour with a gentleman who has written the Bob Dylan in London book. So we're looking forward to doing that. Yeah, Handel tour, a Mozart and Handel tour is coming as well. A Lionel Bart tour of London, the fellow who wrote Oliver, my favourite musical of all time. His life was a tale of rags to riches, then back down to way below rags again. It's a dramatic tale all in its own right, Lionel Bart. And it's also a tale of the Jewish immigrants in London as well, who are a hugely important immigrant group in our history here in London. So yeah, it really is never a dull moment. We've got a lot in the pipeline.
Well, and that's always been, I think, the trademark of London Walks is that you guys are so great at doing deep dives on topics that I've never even thought to study or read about. And then you go on these walks and you're just gripped by the tunnels of London. Or, you know, I went on a Hampstead walk that I just thought was one of the most spectacular walking tours I think I've ever been on. And I'd never even been up to Hampstead before. So you guys are so good at crafting a really fantastic story. So I hope that these things go really well for you guys. I'm definitely going to jump onto one of those these days. But the question then is, how do people find out what you're doing, and how do they sign up?
Yes, well, the next one. In fact, I wonder, can I pop this in the chat here? I think
Yeah,
there's a
go ahead
little.
and pop that in the chat, and then I'll put it on my Facebook page for those who are watching live on Facebook as well.
Great. That's the Saturday evening for us, Saturday afternoon for you guys. Beatles tour, virtual beatlemania.eventbrite.co.uk. But perhaps more easy to remember. I'll just type this one in actual fact.
If they go to walks.com, is there a way to find your walks there? Find your virtual tours?
Exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So nice and easy there. Walks.com. That's the London Walks website. So you'll find my tours there. You'll find my wife Karen's tours there, and my colleague Simon. We've got a Sherlock Holmes tour coming along as well in a couple of weeks' time. So all sorts. Do keep in touch.
That sounds great. So that's easy to remember if you guys are interested in joining any of these tours. Walks, WALKS.com, for those of you on Facebook that don't see the link there. And it's Adam, Karen, who else is doing the virtuals?
Simon Whitehouse, David Tucker, Russell is doing a City of London tour. Andy's doing Disastrous London, which is fire and plague and all that crowd. Richard Walker is doing a magic London tour, dealing in sort of magic and mystery. It's a broad program.
Wow, yeah, that could keep us entertained for quite a long time. So I do hope you guys offer more things that are on U.S. time, so more of our family out here can watch what you guys are doing. So thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today. You are an absolute star, and I cannot wait to come and visit you and the family again, and to go and browse the Covent Garden Market with our kids and learn more about music from you, because you're such a great teacher. So I hope you guys all have enjoyed our talk today with Adam. And again, he's from walks.com, and you can find his walks there. And absolutely, I will be joining them and holding on to my ticket, because I'm going to take you up on that offer to come back to London and take one live. So, all right, everybody. So this is it for Lunch and Learn this Friday afternoon. Monday, if you want to join me again here on Adventures with Sarah, I'm going to be joined by my friend Elisabetta Franchetti from Florence, who's a local guide there, and she's hysterical. So that's going to be our Monday coffee chat. Friday's Lunch and Learn is indeterminate yet, so it'll be a surprise, but we will also have a live cooking adventure again on Thursday next week. So thanks everybody for joining me today, and thank you so much, Adam. We'll see y'all again soon.
Thank you.
Ciao.